Hey everyone, welcome to Hit the Apex podcast. It's Jawad here as always. Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope everyone's doing well wherever you are in the world. Been a good week. Hope it's been a good week for you all anyway. Got a bit of a bumper episode coming up for you today, especially in the second half. I've got had a little chat on the weekend with none other than Steve Jackson of Shakedown, Formula Shakedown, and Grid Talk Podcast fame. We talked Bathurst 12 Hour, and it was such a great chat. I enjoyed it. Talking about one of my favourite events in the world, and that's coming up in the second half of this episode. So please hang on for that, or you could fast forward. I don't really care, to be honest, as long as you enjoy it. That's the main thing. So but in the meantime, I have to ask the question, you know what capitalism is, Frank? It's the Miami Grand Prix. I had to put, a Scarface quote in it, of course, because it's Miami. But we had the Miami Grand Prix on as well over the weekend. A lot of people walking away from it with mixed feelings. On one side, it was a success, commercially, and for whoever was one of the lucky few that got to attend the event. Some, I don't even know the numbers, but just, how expensive it was to get a ticket, how quickly they sold out, and then just looking at how exclusive it was, to be there, kind of thing. I'll talk about it a bit later. Is the F1 kind of going through an exclusivity problem again, like it did during the Bernie Ecclestone era? But first, talking about the racing and what happened on track. So, interesting weekend, you've got to say. We're starting to... I'm not going to say we're starting to see cracks with Ferrari or anything. I think it's a thing where they've just got to bring upgrades and bring them fast. I'm pretty sure they will for the next round in Barcelona. But it was basically Max Verstappen, Red Bull outdoing Ferrari on pace. They had a convincing win on Sunday despite Charles Leclerc taking pole on Saturday. Max kind of made a mistake and also lost time on Friday during practice as well. So that wasn't good for them, but they came out in the race. He took the lead, cut the championship gap down to 19 points now, which, when you consider that second DNF that he had in Australia not too long ago, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I saw some people write off Verstappen and say, oh, he can't claw that deficit back or whatever, but here we are. Here we are, like only 2 races later, and the gap has gone down to 19 points. So, not to discount the effort of Leclerc this time. I think he drove solidly and bounced back from his own little mistake that he made in Imola. But the pace of the Red Bull, they couldn't be beaten on the straights. They were so good. And even when Leclerc did kind of get into the slipstream after the safety car restart, the Red Bull just had what it needed to get ahead. At the start, we had the Ferraris lock out the front row. Max gets a better start, gets ahead of Sainz immediately, but good for Sainz to qualify up there and, not have a bad race like he has the last 2 times. And then by the time we got to lap 9, Max was able to get past Leclerc, and then Leclerc kind of locks up at turn 17 trying to catch the Red Bull and get back in front of him, but ends up losing more time heading into the pit stop phase. And then pretty much from there, Max kind of stretched his legs and did what he needed to. We saw Ferrari come in on lap 25 to pit Leclerc for the hard tyres. Max came in a couple of laps later without losing the lead. You had their teammates Sainz and Sergio Perez running 3rd and 4th at that time. And Sergio had great pace too, but unfortunately was hampered by a power unit problem, which cost him the opportunity to fight with Sainz. I think if he didn't have that problem, he would have easily been able to stand on the podium. Even switching to the medium tyres later on in the race, when the safety car came out to be on that fresher tyre, he still couldn't get past him. So for Checo to then after the race say that he feared that he might not even see the end of the race with this problem, but to then finish 4th was pretty great. So 1st and 4th for Red Bull. The rest of the race just petered out in procession. It was quite dull, you've got to say, between that and, you know, the race direction, or the TV direction, sorry, I should say. Race direction is another story. TV direction, just cutting to shots of the crowd and whatnot, you know, every moment they had, missing like battles when we had Max and Leclerc towards the end trying to have their little squabble. Then we had like a massive DRS train involving Haas, Aston Martin, Lando Norris. You know, that was more exciting than watching, you know, some drunk people in the crowd waving their arms about, you know. So yeah, like I get the passion of the crowd and everything. It's important to showcase that, but you don't need to go over the top with it, even though everything in Miami was over the top, it seemed, over the weekend. So even though the race kind of petered out in procession for that middle part of it, it wasn't until lap 41 we saw it re-energized. There was contact between Pierre Gasly and Lando Norris, which saw the safety car came out. Unfortunately, that was Lando's day done. We'll get to specifics on Lando a bit later, but Gasly, I think he had an incident with Fernando Alonso. Alonso was a bit naughty in this race, you got to say. He got involved in a lot of incidents, including the start. I think he gave Lewis Hamilton a bit of a tap as well, and then he was stuck behind Gasly for most of the race, and going for an opportune move into turn one wounds Gasly, and then Gasly kind of limping around the track. One of those blind fast sections there, which, you know, we've heard complaints about. Didn't see Lando coming, and Lando's coming at full speed, and they collect each other, and then the McLaren ended up being the worse off in that incident. So that brought out the safety car, you know, allowed people to do their pits who hadn't pitted, possibly switch to a two-stop strategy if they thought that they could get more points and some more overtaking done. But overall, Lando's race, while we're on the subject, was ruined by his first pit stop and coming out amongst or behind that Haas and Aston Martin DRS train. So again, one of those track-specific things where, you know, the track surface was so bad that, you know, that even with DRS, they couldn't get past each other at certain parts, and that pretty much ruined his opportunity to get some points on the day for McLaren. We'll talk about Daniel Ricciardo as well a bit later, but he didn't really help their cause either. We saw the field compressed as a result of the safety car, as always. George Russell was one of those lucky drivers again to capitalise in that instance, like he's done on a number of occasions already this year, like he did in Australia as well. Switching to he started on the hard tyre, having qualified outside the top 10, ran long into the race, and then switched over to the medium. And much to the ire of his teammate, I think I've said that line maybe, you know, on every single podcast this year so far in relation to Lewis, but Lewis was mad about it. He was on the radio to his team and like, you know, again, why is George ahead? Why didn't you do anything about it on my end? And basically, you know, at the end of the day, what do Mercedes do if they bring in Hamilton for a second time? He's going to come out, you know, behind George anyway, and behind another couple of cars, and has to do the work to catch back up. So it was just one of those instances where he was just unlucky, and you've got to accept that sometimes when you're racing in those positions. So, you know, when your teammate qualifies outside the top 10, you're not racing for championship or anything like that, you're just trying to maximize your points. You're going to try some weird strategies, or not really weird, you're going to try different strategies, and what they did was George was great, you know, and good on them for doing it. They got some good positions out of it, they got some good points, and again, even though he's a 7-time world champ, you know, it doesn't matter from a team perspective sometimes when they're not fighting for a world champ, like a driver's world championship or whatever. They're not going to prioritize a particular driver, they're just going to go out and get the best possible finish they could. So, you know, in that instance, Mercedes showing that they've got their drivers on equal footing and all that, you know, all this talk about whether George will be number 2 to Hamilton and all that sort of thing. And if I were Hamilton, yeah, I'd be mad, but also be like, okay, well, it's not the team's fault, it's just the position I was in. It's just the bad luck of it kind of thing. So And I'll go over some other stuff about Hamilton as well later, because he's been in the headlines over things that just, this year, 2022, with FIA and race control and all that, what are they doing? But we'll talk about that in a little bit anyway, separately. So George ended up getting the jump on his teammate. He was on for some solid points. Checo pitted for the fresh mediums as well, but wasn't able to pass Sainz. And then we saw Leclerc on the restart get a toe on Max, but wasn't able to pass him in the end, so we didn't get the repeat of what we saw in Jeddah with those two fighting wheel to wheel. But in the end, it was a third win of the year for Max. The stat that seems to be important in people's minds is that whenever he's finished a race this year, he has won. We've only had the 5 races, and 2 of them have been DNFs for Max, but he finished ahead of the Ferraris, so good result for Ferrari for the Constructors' Championship, and also for Carlos Sainz as well, much needed P3. Like, it might not have been an exciting race for him, but to be able to come home third, collect a trophy, back on the podium after the last 2 races where he didn't even see it past the end of the first lap, it's quite important. And for Red Bull, though, getting what they did with first and fourth with the fastest lap too, they've also cut the gap in the Constructors' Championship to 6 points now as well. So, that, I guess, Ferrari's early season lead that they had hurt by the 2 DNFs for Sainz, but then it's kind of equalised it with the 2 DNFs that Max had, and I think even Checo had the DNF in Bahrain as well. So 6 points, it's kind of energised this battle that we have in the Constructors' Championship too, which is going to be exciting moving forward. Valtteri Bottas, he's caused some intrigue as well early this week. I'm sure everyone who is an F1 fan and has Instagram would have seen his latest post. So yeah, bear and all again hopefully for Drive to Survive season 5 or whatever. Everyone seems to be a fan of Valtteri Bottas's rear end in that instance, but he did well in qualifying. He was 5th fastest. I mean, this is the thing, which people say, leaving Mercedes has made him so good now. It's like, well, he's always been this good. It's just at Mercedes it was hard for him to show how good he was because he had a 7-time world champion teammate, and also the mental side of things as well, having been put in that position of number 2 driver for so long. The wingman would eat away at you mentally. But qualifying 5th in an Alfa Romeo, he was on to finish P5 as well. He had a bit of a lonely race until after the safety car restart. He ran a little wide and actually gave up the places to his former team, to Mercedes, so that allowed Russell to finish 5th, Lewis Hamilton to finish 6th, and then Bottas coming home in 7th to still score some decent points for Alfa Romeo. They're looking very good where they are at the moment in the championship. But yeah, unfortunately, that mistake kind of cost him what would have been another really good 5th place. Behind those guys, we had Esteban Ocon in 8th, and when you look at the context of his weekend, that 8th does indeed, like he said, feels like a win, because he didn't end up actually competing in qualifying due to a crash that he had in FP3. He pitted under the safety car, having started on the hard tyres, and was able to essentially get that cheap pit stop and finish in the points. The crash that he had in FP3 caused a bit of controversy as well, because it didn't seem like it was a severe crash, but there was this whole argument about why are there no Tech Pro barriers on the walls at this track. Surely they could, if they've spent so much money on a fake marina, as has been the meme in the build up to this event, they could have put Tech Pro barriers on for safety. We're talking about safety and all that sort of jazz. Why no Tech Pro barriers? So effectively, without the Tech Pro barrier, with him, hitting the concrete wall as it was, put a crack in the chassis, and because it was so late, or not because it was late, but because they couldn't get the car back immediately because there's no, slip roads or, infield for them to transport the car back to the pit lane. They got the car back at the end of FP3, and then by then there's no time before qualifying to actually make the repairs. So then for Alpine, it was a matter of getting it ready for the race and starting from the back of the grid. So to then finish P8 is amazing, but then at the same time, they'll be furious at the fact that, they had their job made harder just because of circuit characteristics and whatnot. Disappointing though for the other side of the Alpine garage. Fernando Alonso scoreless now in 4 races this season. He gets 2 5-second penalties, of course. We talked about the hit with Pierre Gasly. And he was stuck behind Gasly for, pretty much the entire race and wasn't able to pass. I think he just got a bit cranky and hot under the collar and ended up making a botched move, which caused that. But then also later in the race, he went off the track and gained an advantage, which he got the second penalty for. So he was on to score 9th in the provisional classification, which I had running on my live blog. I had to go back and see what the positions were as it was happening, and he was on for 9th, but unfortunately the penalty kind of relegated him outside of the points in that instance and allowed Alex Albon to be elevated up to 9th. So his best finish for the season, since he's returned to F1, best finish for Williams this year as well, so more points for him. Everyone says it's the red hair that's doing it. Of course, you put red on anything, it'll go faster, as is the old adage with that. So great to see for those guys, and they're not too far behind Aston Martin now in the Constructors' Championship. And we also saw Aston Martin, Lance Stroll elevated to P10 as a result of the Alonso penalty, and also I think there was a penalty to Daniel Ricciardo as well for the same thing as Alonso, going off track and gaining an advantage. So he was penalised 5 seconds and dropped down the order too. And bit of a horrible one for Aston Martin otherwise. They had a decent quali. They had both cars in Q2, and then I think one of them made it to Q3. Don't know how, but they did. But ended up having to start the race from the pit lane because their fuel was too cold or something. So part of the regulations is the fuel has to be a certain temperature, and because of how hot it was in Miami all weekend, they kept their fuel on ice essentially, and then when it was time to actually get the cars on the grid, the fuel was found to be too cold. So they thought, rather than take it to the grid and risk getting a penalty, we might as well just start from pit lane so we can get the fuel up to temperature and all that. So, when you start your car in the morning, on a cold morning, and you've got to warm it up and all that, basically that was kind of what happened to those guys. And for Sebastian Vettel, unfortunate late race incident with Mick Schumacher. I mean, there's the whole paternal kind of relationship going on between those two, which is really cute, and we all love seeing it. It warms us all very, very dearly to see Sebastian mentoring son of Michael Schumacher, who pretty much Michael mentored and was father figure to Seb in his early days in F1 in the paddock and everything. But those two unfortunately coming together at turn 1, it cost not only Seb points, but Schumacher was on for points as well, his first ever points in F1, and it is getting to that so far this season, Mick has been in positions where he could score points and have a good result, but just things have happened, he's made mistakes, and it's just not really come to fruition. So a bit unfortunate for both of those guys at turn 1. Haas not scoring points at all in one of their home Grand Prix this weekend. So Magnussen was last of the classified runners in 16th. Schumacher, lucky not to have to DNF the car or whatever. He was still classified in 15th, but no points for those guys in their home race. They'll hope that later in the year when they get to COTA, it won't be the same story. But yeah, they should not be that far down. And for Mick as well, it's really becoming a bit testing, because if, his previous formulas and junior series that he's done are anything to go by, in his second season, he's meant to actually come good and, be that championship caliber driver that he was in F2 and F3. Not that he's going to be winning a championship in a Haas, but he should be scoring points sooner than later. We saw Guan Yu Zhou as well out early with a mechanical failure, so no opportunity for him to do well in Miami. Did had a good qualifying though. Daniel Ricciardo, as I said, had the 5-second penalty and ended up in 13th when possibly he could have had a point because of Alonso's penalty. But for him anyway, it was just another messy weekend. He couldn't get the car out of Q2 and then basically was losing positions at the start. Like, he gained a couple of positions, but then just got picked off by Haas cars and, Aston Martin. It just, it wasn't a great weekend for Ricciardo at all. And all of a sudden now, because of how good Lando's been so far this season, he was on the podium in Imola and didn't have the best weekend this time with a DNF, and ended a streak of points finishes for Lando as well. I think 15 races or whatever. Again, Ricciardo's future has been called into question, and even though he's under contract next year, part of his initial 3-year agreement with McLaren when he made the switch, there's debate, discussion, whatever you want to call it, about whether McLaren should see it through and whatnot. And I would say, look, yes, hopefully he improves later this season and whatnot, but if not, and the opportunity arises to put someone else in the car who's going to be better, that's the key word, is going to be an improvement, then go for it. I know there's this obsession at the moment of having an American driver in F1 and all that, and Zach Brown, the McLaren CEO, with his ties to Andretti, Michael Andretti and Andretti Autosport and whatnot, trying to get Colton Herta into the car. Now, a lot of people will come out and say, but he's got Pato O'Ward in his McLaren Indy car. Why can't he be the driver who comes in? But the thing is, if they want an American driver, Pato, unfortunately, is Mexican. So, that whole thing, like, in my mind, it all made sense. It was like, oh yeah, put Pato in, he's an IndyCar driver. It didn't dawn on me to think, he's actually, he's not actually from the United States or whatever. He's not a US driver like your Colton Hertas or Alexander Rossi's and all that. So as much as I'd love to see Pato have a go, I think, if they really want an American driver in the sport, then, it's going to be Colton, even though Colton hasn't really proven himself as a consistent IndyCar championship threat yet, which, we'll wait and see. I mean, if that's the case, let's give Scott McLaughlin a go. I want Scott McLaughlin, Kiwi, put a Kiwi in a McLaren. That's going to be cool. I don't think that's going to happen, but we can dare to dream about it anyway. Exciting too, because it is the month of May, and we've got the Grand Prix of Indianapolis and also the Indy 500 coming up later this month too. A lot of racing to look forward to, so it's going to be quite good with that. But with Daniel Ricciardo, who knows? We just have to wait and see how the rest of the season pans out. It's really sad though, you kind of consigned to the fact that unless he does a Nigel Mansell, he's not going to win a championship in F1 at the moment. He'll just be another one of those Aussie drivers that, has done really well to win races and be a threat here and there. Has a Monaco Grand Prix win to his name. Is one in Monza. So one at Spa, has some famous wins under his belt, but yeah, just couldn't quite get the championship thing done. So hopefully the new hope will be Oscar Piastri to do that. So that pretty much caps off, the on-track stuff with the race. To talk about the Miami Grand Prix weekend as a whole, I guess you could say that the grid walk that Martin Brundle did, which, is in itself a bit of a meme at the moment, kind of surmised the weekend. Poor Brundle. I feel like he's just doing his job kind of thing. And we love, all the F1 fans love Martin Brundle. He does such a great job with the grid walk wherever he goes in the world. And there's people who recognise him. There's people who are honoured to be on the grid walk. And then you've got these pair of aloof celebrities, and most of them I don't even know who they are, to be honest. I mean, I could pick a few of them. My favourite one was, and this is no slight on Martin, because I would have been, I don't even know who this basketball player was from Duke University or whatever. He confused him for Patrick Mahomes, the NFL player. So that was quite hilarious. But yeah, kind of just that summed up the race. There's people here who probably have no clue about F1. They're just there because it's a big event and they get to be seen and everything and whatnot. Yeah, I've heard this spiel about how this is how, sponsors meet teams and stuff like that, and this is how funding comes to the sport and everything. But when you compare that to the other things that happen on the weekend, the lack of the tech pro barriers, let's spend more money on this bloody marina than getting some safety things put out. And then while we're on the subject of safety, the FIA and their new scrutineering measures on underwear and jewellery, like that's something that, when it first cropped up in Australia and I was sitting in the press conference and I was like, what? Why are we talking about underwear? And Christian Horner was like, my drivers just go commando, so, and then Lewis was like, well, I've got certain jewellery that I can't actually remove, wink wink, and that got Max Verstappen kind of, imagining things on the spot. And I understand that the rules have been in place for years, which has been brought to everyone's attention and whatnot, and they're just trying to say, oh, look, off the back of Roman Grosjean's incident, in the case there is a fire or whatever, you can reduce the chances of burns and whatnot or serious injury if you don't have jewelry in the car. Now, that's a fair point to make, but the fact that, they're going so gung-ho about it at the moment is like, there's bigger fish to fry. Seriously, there's things that are going on at the moment in the sport where the one thing I said earlier about an exclusivity problem again, I do feel like even though we've got all this accessibility and, yada yada, social media and Liberty Media have done a good job with all that we're starting to see F1 create an exclusivity problem again within the sport, trying to make it specifically for the elite, to come to the races, bump up the ticket prices, so only certain people are allowed to come, not your average fans who, let's be fair, so many fans have got or so many fans have been made over the world in the last 2 years because of things like Drive to Survive and because we've all been in lockdowns and, what's on at night on night to watch if you're in this side of the world or in America and whatnot. It's Formula One and, they all love that stuff. So trying to create, a divide between, two different classes or whatever is absolute rubbish. And, to remind everyone of what I said earlier in the season, F1 is a world championship, not just a United States and Middle East series or whatever that, what we're seeing at the moment with more races in the US. And of course, next year we will have more races in the US than we do in any country, any one country, or US is the one country that has the most races compared to everywhere else in the world. And then we've got like 5 races as well in the Middle East. We've got street races that don't make sense, like I know we need to go to the best circuits in the world, the most challenging circuits, but we don't need 5 of the same kind of street circuit. I mean, if we've got Jeddah, then why do we need Miami? Or if we've got Miami, why do we need the other one? It's the same thing that we're watching, just in a different time zone and with lights, no lights or whatever, and human rights problems and whatnot. Not that like Miami probably has the same thing going on as well. Like Monaco, I understand it's your crown jewel, and there's all debate about Monaco too at the moment. But like we had Singapore. Great. We haven't had Singapore for the last 2 years. I'm looking forward to it coming back and seeing how it goes with these new era of cars. We had Baku, first year, not so good. Second year, it did really well. And now it's kind of a mainstay. Everyone has a soft spot for Baku. Why do we need Jeddah? It's just, I'm over it. I still agree with what Hamilton said about, having a race in Africa, possibly South Africa and Kyalami, which is being talked about, and that'll be good because it's a classic circuit, a lot of nostalgia there, but also it's a great circuit. And it's not just because we're sitting here with rose-tinted glasses that we want a classic circuit back. No, it's because it's actually good it's an actually good track. That's what happened when we brought back, and this wasn't even Liberty Media, it was still under the Bernie Ecclestone era, when they brought back Austria. We love Austria. And then Liberty Media, they brought back Zandvoort, they brought back Imola to being a permanent, facility. Turkey, the couple of races we had there, they were great. So that's the thing, these permanent tracks is what F1 should be about, not just exclusively racing in a car park with fake marinas. It's just not good. And the whole jewellery thing as well. So Hamilton's off the hook for 2 races. He's been given an exemption or whatever. And we saw Seb Vettel as well doing his protest with wearing his underwear above his race suit. I mean, if there is something brewing, between the FIA and Formula One, it could be like catastrophic. It could be damaging and whatnot. The question is why. I know we've got a new president, Mohammed bin Sulayem, and whatnot, but why is he trying to rattle the cage? Why is he trying to change things that don't really need to be changed? When, coming off the back of last year and what happened in Abu Dhabi, they took their time to come to a decision, basically scapegoated an individual and put 2 new race directors in charge. To be honest or whatever, I'm not convinced about them either so far this season. It's just, so far we've had Niels Vitic run all 5 of the races we've had. Eduardo Freitas will do his first race next time. But the whole thing about, having 2 separate race directors alternating and whatnot was so that, you would think that it would be to avoid problems like we had in the build-up to Miami with both of them getting COVID. It's like, then... And neither of them were in Miami. Like, Vitic had to run the race remotely from that FIA bunker that they wanted to do, like the VAR in football. So, anyway, it's just making my brain melt just thinking about all these things. So, rather than, again, focus on what could be a good championship year for Formula One, we've got these exciting new cars. We've got, 2 different teams fighting at the front for the championship and whatnot. We have these other issues going on which, seem to take everyone's attention away from it. And even Andretti, Andretti trying to become the 11th team in Formula One. He got denied by Sauber last year for a takeover of that team, and now he's trying to start his own entry. The FIA seem to support that, but then you've got 8 out of the 10 teams saying no to him. Basically, he went from door to door in the paddock to everyone's hospitality, and basically only got 2 signatures in support of him, and I think they were Zach Brown, of course, which is a given, and then the Alpine boss Laurent Rossi was the only other signature he was able to get. So, like for people like Toto Wolff, for Christian Horner, they're saying, we don't want to dilute the prize funds or whatever for the existing 10 teams and whatnot, but I'm sure that they could make something, create something to not do that. It's changed a lot, Formula One, in the last 5 years or whatever since Liberty Media took over, and it's all to do with trying to equalize the funds and everything and make sure it's a level playing field. And to have a team like Andretti want to come in as well, it's not just some startup, some random dude who's like, yeah, I've got a lot of money, I want to just like make an F1 team, I'm going to throw money at it like Lawrence Stroll and hope that it does well. I don't think Andretti's that kind of person. I mean, every other category he's gone into, he's been successful. But yeah, just no one seems to want to give him a chance, and that's really sad. Anyway, I'll leave all the Miami stuff on the table there. Whatever, we'll see what happens in the next week before we head over to Barcelona. Doubleheader coming up with Barcelona and Monaco at the end of this month, so that'll be exciting to look forward to. And you'll hear me talk about F1. After the Barcelona Grand Prix, so I won't do a preview episode as expected. Quickly touch on the Perth Super Night for supercars as well, which was 2 weeks ago. Shane van Gisbergen broke his Perth duck. He was able to take 2 wins of the 3. Will Davison also broke finally his drought of wins, winning the second race, basically because Cam Waters was penalised for passing on the outside of the final corner or whatever, or gaining an advantage or whatever. That was another big story that everyone got worked up about that weekend, but it was unfortunate for Cam. The reaction, I guess, was a bit poorer than expected. And then, of course, Walkinshaw and Andretti United as well after Perth. Of course, they had a tough weekend in Perth. They announced a shock switch of manufacturer. They haven't brought a new manufacturer into supercars, but they're switching to Ford for 2023. So considering this is a team that has such rich history with Holden and with GM or whatever, they used to be the former factory Holden racing team, to be switching over to the Ford Mustang next year is big, and I'm actually quite excited to see that. So good on Ryan Walkinshaw, Michael Andretti and Zach Brown, Bruce Stewart and all the people at WAU for sticking in there, and hopefully the fans are going to be kind to them over this one as well. So yeah, that's it, stay tuned for my chat with Steve about the Bathurst 12 hour. And I'll catch you guys next time. And it's time to talk about one of my favourite events on the Australian motorsport calendar, if not the world motorsport calendar. It's been a while since we've had it, and I'm delighted to have a fellow fan with me today, Steve Jackson of Formula Shakedown. G'day, Steve. How you
Morning,
doing?
mate. How are you?
Yeah.
Or afternoon, I should say.
Afternoon, yeah. Friendly time zones for both of us to have this chat, which is really good. I've been looking forward to it all week. So you're a Formula Shakedown, nice little group that talks all things racing. You want to tell us a bit about yourself and what it is before we get going?
Yeah. So, Shakedown, just in general, is effectively like a celebration of all things motorsport. So we'll talk about basically anything. Couple of series we do avoid just to save arguments, but Shakedown split across three groups. So we've got Formula Shakedown, Moto Shakedown for bikes basically, and also Shakedown itself, which focuses more on GTs, prototypes, sports cars, that sort of thing. So across the three, I think we've got around 8,500 members or so. So it's reasonably healthy. Majority of us are based in Australasia in terms of admins and that sort of thing. But I mean, wherever you are in the world, you're more than welcome to join. The idea behind Shakedown is basically just to avoid a lot of the nastiness and just sort of mudslinging that you get on other sites. So we're very much all about the positivity and that sort of thing. I mean it's really just a great place to sort of network and meet other fans and just have a bit of a chat. And events like the 12 hour tend to bring out a lot of the people who just sort of lurk, and we've got chats that get set up for these events, and it's just a really good way of sort of enjoying these events. Wherever you are in the world, it's tricky being in New Zealand sometimes as a motorsport fan because everything's on at Sparrow's Fart o'clock in the morning or stupidly late at night. And the 12 hours is one of those rare events where you can enjoy your racing and not have to have a IV of coffee plugged into you at the same time. So it's a wonderful event, but it's one of the many events that we tend to showcase. And to me, the 12 hours right up there with Spa 24, Nürburgring 24, Le Mans, that sort of thing. It's one of the sort of one of the hallmark endurance events. So I mean, I'm definitely not the only one who's ready to go for this. I mean, like the chat and shakedown is very much swung in the favour of the 12 hour, and even though it's a small grid, the quality is just as I think this is one of the best driver lineups we've had in a very long time, and some newcomers to the mountain as well. So exciting times.
Yeah, we'll get into driver lineups and the depth of the field in a bit. So I'll also put all the links to the Shakedown pages into the description for you listeners out there. And yeah, if you didn't guess already, we're talking about the Bathurst 12 hour, which for many years has always been kind of at the start of the year in February. We missed out last year due to obvious reasons, which I don't need to go into. And again, early this season we had it scheduled for February, but a new variant struck and things got pushed back and everything. And eventually, with the help of SRO and local people and all that, we got a date in May. We're in May now, and yeah, we're only a week away from the event. So how exciting! I've really missed it. It's one of my favorite events to go to. It's one of my favorite tracks in the world to go to. Like you say, it is up there with Spa 24 Hour as well. When one of those circuits which drivers just when you hear them talk, they're like, I want to go to Bathurst. I was listening to the podcast that Tom Clarkson does for Formula One. He was talking to Alexander Rossi, who came and did a Supercars wild card a few years ago with Andretti Autosport. And, as much as he had probably not the best time there, he was saying it's still one of his favorite circuits. So it's good to hear when, such highly rated international drivers talk about this 6.2 kilometer public road west of Sydney, or well west of Sydney, in such high regard.
Yeah, it's one of those places where even though I mean, let's be honest, it's in the middle of nowhere. um, like the drive to Bathurst is far longer than I thought it would be the first time I did it. It was it was a bit of an adventure, but yeah, the amount of interest we get from just I mean drivers from various series. Like I mean, we've heard talk of the likes of Daniel Ricciardo and that sort of thing wanting to have a go, and Valentino Rossi, who's only recently begun his GT3 career in earnest, has mentioned the 12 hour as one of the many races that he wants to attend as well, which would, if he turns up at any point, I'm there. I don't care what time it is, where it is, what the weather is. I'm there.
Yeah,
I'm there in yellow. But yeah, it's one of those races I think that transcends the category that it's in and just becomes quite. It's really hard to put into words, but it's as you say, it's a public road. It's more or less in the middle of nowhere, but it produces some of the best racing that we've seen on the planet. And I think GT3 tends to produce very, very good racing, just with the way that, especially with the way the Stefan Reitel organization and so on, like managed to balance these cars so well. But even then, the circuit itself, you wouldn't think, looking at how narrow it is, especially over the top, that it produces the racing that it has. But it's I think it's definitely a bucket list event for a lot of drivers, and that also explains why we see so many drivers make the trip from Europe or America or wherever they're based, down to Australia for effectively one race out of a very sort of spread out calendar. And a lot of these guys have commitments in Europe, and especially with GT World Challenge and the endurance cups and International Open and NLS, and they could be anywhere in the world, but the fact that they choose to come to Australia really does highlight just how quality this event is, and just how amazing the circuit is as well.
Absolutely right. And what you said about Valentino there, that's the dream. I said as soon as he made the switch to GT3 and doing the GT World Challenge, or the European GT Challenge or whatever, like, all right, he's got to be in the frame to come to Bathurst and have a tilt at the 12 hour. So that would be good to see in the future. Alas, it won't be this year, but the 12 hour wasn't always like, it's always been a major event here in Australia. It wasn't always how it is. So 2011 was effectively the year that put the race on the map, with the transition over to GT3 machinery. We started to see this interest from factory teams from Europe, the likes of Audi, Mercedes AMG, Porsche as well eventually got in. And then 2019, I think it was, that it became part of the Intercontinental GT Challenge, which is basically this mini championship of like 4 epic races, which include the Spa 24 hour. There's a race at Kyalami. There was a race at Indy. I'm not sure how it looks this season, but it's definitely grown in the last decade, compared to how it was, where we'd have, production cars. Basically, it's basically what the Bathurst 6 hour is now, what the 12 hour used to be. And we had mostly, your local drivers from V8 supercars or, various other categories around Australasia.
Yeah, I think it was Audi who took 2011, wasn't it? I think they're the only manufacturer of sort of won more than once
Mm.
since 2011, since it became more of a GT3 format. But I mean, looking at like the race goes all the way back, so it was first run 1991, 1992, around there,
Mm.
and it was Toyota Supra that won. First time around, so it's gone from very much like a I hate using the term grassroots because it's always attracted such incredible talent, but it was definitely more of a production focus, as you say, and like the 6 hour sort of fills that gap now. And we had a time where it was a 24-hour event for a couple of years as well, I think in the early 2000s. But I think the way sort of it's structured now, and the fact that it's been incorporated into the IGTC, which is a fantastic series as well. Uh, it's sort of again, it highlights just how how quality this event is. And I mean, going back all the way to 2011, like Christopher Mees is a guy who still comes back to the mountain today if he can get a chance, and he won all the way back in 2011. The fact that he's willing to travel all the way from, I think he lives in Switzerland now, all the way from Switzerland to Australia for one event a year, that's a long way to go racing. So yeah, he's obviously a massive fan. But yeah, so since 2011, it's become stronger and stronger each year. I think 2019 was definitely my standout year, just in terms of the quality of on track racing. And just there was a little bit of controversy as well with that coming together between Matt Campbell and I think it's Chaz Mostert
Mm.
in the BMW as well. So like a little bit of controversy always sort of riles things up, and there was a bit of mystery as to whether EBM actually Urban Motorsport actually won that race, because the penalty was still very much up in the air by the time the flag dropped. But yeah, I think the way it's run now is very much the way I'd like to see it continue. But there's opportunity for. I was having a chat with a friend just a couple of days ago actually, and we were talking about getting like Australian TCR in the mix there as well at some point, just to try and shake things up. But yeah, I mean, for now, it's very much the focus is on GT3, and I love the fact that even though that's the highlight series, or uh, um, the highlight sort of championship. The fact that they still allow invitationals, so we've got a couple of the Mark cars coming back this year. They are phenomenally loud. If you've never heard one before, they are. The Bentley is loud. The GT3 Bentley, which is no longer, is incredibly loud. The Mark sounds like God's plumbing. It's an incredibly loud car. So please take hearing protection if you're going this weekend.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's really good that they've managed to bridge this gap between a very much like a homegrown event, along with the wealth of talent that this attracts, and so many teams like Group M, and like we've had KCMG with the Skylines, and M Sport with their Bentleys, Audi with I think every team they've ever had,
Yep.
WRT,
WRT.
Triple F have turned up, didn't go so well, but like just the fact that it attracts such these big names from GT3 racing really does show how healthy this event is, even with the numbers this year. I think this is. I'm not overly concerned about the future of the series, because just the quality of driving that we see, and the quality of just the whole weekend really does speak for itself.
Pretty much. And like going back to what you're saying about the Mark cars, like, Yeah, if there was a grid full of them, I would need hearing protection. But because there's only one that goes past you every 2 minutes, it's kind of acceptable. The Mark Mustangs, when I went last time, whoa, they were incredibly loud, louder than the Bentley GT3, like you said as well. So yeah, looking at some of previous wins, like you mentioned, Audi have the most wins of any of the manufacturers that have come to the 12-hour and the GT3 era. They're gunning for their fourth win this year, and they've got such a great field. But looking back, we've had great teams, local teams even, Erebus Motorsport winning in 2013 with Mercedes, famous win for Godzilla, the Nissan GTR in 2015 with that epic stint from Katsumasa Chiyo as well. And then, yeah, your supercars drivers like your Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes winning in 2017 with Mika Salo in the Ferrari as well. And that race in particular, hilarious, controversial towards the end there. You had Shane Van Gisbergen, Mario Engel, I think, racing in the Scott Taylor Motorsport AMG GT3. SVG crashes, Engel very mad. One of the famous moments, I think, and I just remember when that came on the big screens or whatever, and Engel said what he had to say, the entire crowd just went, whoa, like, ooh, he's on fire. Stay away from him. So it's great to see the passion at the track as well as at home when things like that happen.
Yeah, it really does demonstrate how much this race means to these guys as well. Like, they're all competitive and they all want to win, but yeah, it was very much, it was that outburst from, I wouldn't call it an outburst. I fully understand where he was coming from, but that was quite out of character for a usually very calm individual. But yeah, I wasn't there in in 2017 when that occurred, but yeah, a friend of mine was, and he said you could almost cut the air with a knife. It was that, it was that awkward afterwards. But yeah, we've always had little sort of weird, anomalous, or sometimes quite controversial incidents at the 12-hour. I remember I think it was 2019, when one of the KCMG Skylines basically just ignored its penalty with about half an hour, 40 minutes to go. And they were running in sixth or fifth place, and for some reason just didn't pit the car. So, they had points on the table, and for some reason just ignored the penalty. I think it was for weaving once the safety car lights went out, which is a bit of a no-no in this format. So there's always been little things like that, and then you've got the bigger comings together, like Chaz Mostert and Matty Campbell in the same race, with the the two making contact down the end of Conrod Strait. So, there's a lot of especially with longer endurance races and that sort of thing, especially when you get to the tail end of these races, where it definitely becomes more of a sprint to the end, especially if there's been like a late safety car or a red flag period. If you're a fan of the Spa 24-hour, you know that half the race is red flags. So there's always those little incidents just to shake things up a wee bit. But with that in mind, I'm hoping with I'm hoping we get a clean event this year, just with the comparative lack of numbers. But we've always been treated to some incredible racing here. So especially with Audi wanting to clinch that fourth, and a couple of manufacturers aren't really present this year. We've got no Ferrari, we've got no obviously no Bentley, Lamborghini's not present either. Sorry, we've got one Lamborghini, don't we? War
Yep.
Racing. So yeah, I mean it's a bit of a reduced grid in terms of manufacturer representation. And Audi definitely have the strongest presence on the grid, by the looks of things as well. So yeah, they'll be hoping to capitalize on it. They've bought a lot of, I think every single R8 is the current edition, the Evo 2 as well. So they're definitely going for going for the outright win. So yeah, it's very hard to predict with the quality of drivers that we've got, but it's nice seeing so much Australian talent back on the grid as well. It's looking more like it did back in 2011 when it was still the majority of the field was Australian.
Yeah, between Australia and New Zealand, one of my favourite combinations, probably, who I'm going to be secretly hoping for the win is the number 65 car with Chaz Mostert, Fraser Ross, and Liam Talbot in
Yeah,
there. Fraser Ross did an amazing job last time out in 2020, being on the, I think, silver. They won the silver class, I believe it was, racing in that McLaren
yes, yeah,
720S. Yeah, so that was a good result for him. And Chaz Mostert not yet won the 12 hour. He could join a very elite group of few who've actually won the 6 hour, the 1000, and the 12 hour. I think only Paul Morris is in that category at the moment. So
yeah.
he could join his old co driver from 2014 in that group. So I really am a fan of that combination. But looking at who else Audi have brought, they've brought Kelvin van der Linde back. They've got a rookie in Nathaniel Burton. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Marcus Winkelhock again, another one who has been around Bathurst many times in an R8. They've got Ricardo Feller. And then, local guys, Yasser Shahin, who's been racing in GT World Challenge Australia. They've got the Bates entry with Tony Bates, David Reynolds, and Cameron Waters from Supercars as well as the Lee Holdsworth, Mark Sini, and Dean Fiore entry of Hallmark, which is, I think they've been together for quite some time. I think every time I've been to the 12 hour, that car has his delivery and the driver lineup has pretty much been the same. So it is a full-on assault from Audi this year, which if when you look at how big the field is, if they're all on the lead lap, we could have an Audi 1, 2, 3 potentially.
Yeah, it's looking quite likely, and I mean Mercedes really are probably the only brand who, or only other manufacturer who can threaten that. But especially I mean the 74 car, Nathaniel Berthon, Calvin van der Linde, Brad Schumacher, that's quite scary. You've got local talent. You've got Calvin van der Linde, who just drives anything like it's stolen, and Nathaniel Berthon's done. He knows what he's doing. So that's quite a potent combination. Um, uh, you know, and especially with the local side of things as well. There's potential for the local guys to capitalize on having a very, very competitive car and just having a very good day. I mean, the other one that's worth mentioning is BRM with Nick Percat, Joey Mawson, and Mark Rosser as well.
Mm.
Another really good lineup. A lot of these guys are Bathurst veterans, or they've done the 6 hour, or they've driven it in S5000s, and there's I think Audi is definitely looking like I think manufacturer favorite, but Mercedes have bought some quite terrifying names to Australia just to try and get in the way. But I mean, if I was a betting man, it'd be 74 for me. Nathaniel Berthon, Van der Linde, Schumacher. That's where my betting money would go if I were to go for an outright win. Well supported team, factory driver, but two factory drivers, I should say. So yeah, they're looking quite strong, and the Audi's always been good over the mountain. We know that.
Mm. And another name or another combination that looks pretty threatening, racing under the 888 banner this time, which is quite intriguing, is the Sun Energy One car, which, if you watch international GT racing, you watch Daytona and things like that, they're there. Kenny Habul leading that effort. He's done pretty well for himself, I guess, just being pretty much everywhere. Hasn't had much success around the 12 hour yet, but he's got Martin Conrad, Lucas Stoltz, and reigning Bathurst 12 hour winner Jules Gounon as well, who was in the Bentley last time that he raced here. So that's a pretty good combination when you look at it too. And yeah, the benefit, I guess, of not having like an outright pro class as such, it being replaced by pro am, is that they can have that fourth driver in the car as well, depending on your grading and everything. So it just makes it even more competitive having a fourth driver on board, like we do see in some of these teams.
Absolutely, and it gives those AMs the opportunity to work with and drive with some incredible GT3 talent. I mean, um, the opportunity to work with guys like Lucas Stolz or Jules Gounon, or that like anyone would take that opportunity. Anyone who knows GT3 or just like sports car racing in general, those are names that you pay attention to, especially. But as you say, like Kenny Hubble, like not amazing record at the 12 hours so far, but yeah, absolutely phenomenal driver. Martin Conrad as well. That's I th- if as I said before, I mean Mercedes have bought some scary drivers, and I think that's the lineup. That's the lineup I think that would get in the way of Audi the most in taking the fourth one. That and there is also the sorry, let me just find it. Yeah, as you say, Triple Eight, but Ram Motorsport as well with Brett Hobson, who's a Shakedown member. G'day, Brett. Michael Sheargold and Garth Walden as well. So yeah, great local talent there as well. Obviously, Brett Hobson's done a million laps around Bathurst, usually in a Nissan. But I believe the Nissan has moved on, and he's now behind the wheel of something a wee bit different. So very keen to see how he goes. But there's also 19 Court Racing Team. You got Will Brown, Mark Griffith, and Jack Perkins. Again, really solid driver lineup, all local talents as well. So, yeah, I mean the pro, like the fact that there isn't, as you say, like there isn't an outright pro class does throw a spanner in the works of trying to call this. Like it's quite hard to predict, but yeah, with the way that things are sort of shaking up so far, it's definitely Audi versus Mercedes this year, and yeah, the driver side of things is going to be very, very interesting. These guys are all very, very fighty as well. I mean, if you watched opening round of British GT from a couple of weeks ago, Jules Gounon drove like an absolute animal. Didn't quite pull it off, but that was that's some of the best racing I've ever seen, and it's really exciting that he's in Australia for this weekend.
It is indeed, and then can't rule out, of course, everyone's favourite driver, or they love to hate in supercars, Shane Van Gisbergen at the moment, who's been on an absolute winning streak when it comes to the supercars championship. But he is going to be in the Triple Eight Mercedes GT3. He's driven before with Prince Jeffrey Ibrahim, who is a regular in the GT World Challenge Australia. And then they've got the his Red Bull rookie teammate Brock Feeney in the car too. So with Van Gisbergen in the car, anything can happen, as we know. And I don't think he's won a 12-hour before for McLaren back in 2016. That was a great win there for Techno Autosports, but hasn't had much luck in the Mercedes around the mountain. But he's in the absolute form of his life, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're there or thereabouts as well. But talking about some of the manufacturers that are absent, looking, and sometimes with them come names that you don't have on the grid because drivers are aligned to particular factories and all that sort of thing. So no Aston Martin, no McLaren either this year. We know Garage 59, McLaren are quite like closely aligned. BMW as well. You mentioned Nissan, Bentley, which was sadly a casualty of the pandemic. I think that the factory program had to be scrapped, which was a shame, which was straight after their famous win in 2020 at the mountain. So, it's sad not to have that variety of manufacturers on the grid. You miss some of the names that come with them as well. But like at the same time, this is exciting to see what we've got at the moment. And yeah, who knows how it's going to turn out come Sunday afternoon. We're going to have more or less daylight, I should say, as well, given the difference in daylight savings that we have from February. So I think the race starts at a similar time. Correct me if I'm wrong, than it has always, but because of the extended period of darkness, I guess, they're going to be doing a bit more night racing.
Yeah, and that'll be quite a challenge for a lot of these guys who have not real. I mean, the 12 hours always started, before sunrise, but it's an incredibly tricky opening stint for any of these drivers, no matter how skilled they are. Like, it's track's quite cold. Lighting is obviously terrible, and it's not light circuits in Europe. Like if you look at when they do the Paul Ricard 1000 and that sort of thing, where there's stadium quality lighting and that sort of thing. Going over the mountain, you really are on your own. You've just
Yep.
got your headlights and the occasional camera flash, and that's it. It's a very, very different circuit. This so, given the time of year we're doing this, obviously the 12 hours usually February, so it's a lot colder. Tires will be same compound as we've seen so far in other parts of the world this year, but it's a very unfamiliar time of year for a lot of these guys. So I'd expect a lot of especially the more experienced drivers who are able to sort of constantly remind themselves that it's not a sprint, it is a 12-hour event, and you've got to be able to get the car to the finish in order to finish it all. The attrition side of things is a concern. Just like I said earlier, with the lack of numbers on the grid, but the drivers that we do have are all very, very they're sensible. They know when to push, and when it's not so good to drive on the absolute limit. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm just hoping, like, we've got rain predicted for basically the whole weekend. I'm hoping it stays as rain and we don't get snow. We have seen Bathurst covered in snow this time of year many, many times in the past. But hey, look, if it does, we had Spa in World Endurance Championship, I think 2016, it snowed for half the race and they just ran it red flagged. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But it wouldn't surprise me. We've had kangaroos on the track. We've had a tree on the track. We may as well have some snow at some point, right? Like,
Yeah, take
it's going to
advantage
happen.
of take advantage of the weather this time of year, but as you say, it's just depends on what happens on the day. While you're talking about attrition as well, something interesting I have to point out as well is that so many instances we've seen cars not even make it through the practice sessions. They get written off before they even make it to qualifying. There's 6 practice sessions across the weekend plus qualifying, and then you've got the top 10 shootout or Super Pole, like the European audience will know it as. So many times, like, even big names, can have an incident in practice. They get wiped out at the top of the mountain. We know how unforgiving it is with the concrete walls, and then that's their weekend done. So how important is it to just keep it on the bitumen and not in the wall through the practice sessions as well?
Yeah, and I mean, that's my mate. That is the main concern I think that a lot of people have, is just the sometimes the mountain just bites. You could be doing absolutely nothing wrong at all, but this is an incredibly unforgiving circuit. It's not like what you see in Europe and some parts of the States as well, where you've got you know large tarmac runoff areas and then a gravel trap and then a tech pro barrier a mile away from that. It's all very much like, if you make a mistake, there is a wall there, or there is a gravel trap that's going to meet you. It's I hate using the term old school circuit so liberally, but it really is. It's not really a circuit at all. It is. You mentioned it at the start of the recording. It's a public road, and
Yep.
occasionally a motor race breaks out, which I love. It is one of the last holdouts of uncompromising circuit. So these guys will be punished for mistakes, and they, like, okay, you do get the freak accidents as well. Like, I think it was 2020, Yasser Shahin in the Benz Mercedes had a horrific accident up the top of the mountain after one of the marks was running slowly just off the racing line. I think it caught him completely by surprise.
Mm.
And we also saw in that one of the best examples of just how closely knit all these guys are, because I remember quite a few drivers were sort of slowing down or even stopping to see if he was okay. And then we had one of the Aston Martins completely disintegrate over the top, and Ringo van der Zande stopped to pull the driver out. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, like we've seen KCMG ride off their cars in the past. One of the Bentleys got almost written off, but somehow resurrected back into life for 2020 as well, and then ate its own tire 8 hours into the race, which was a bit tragic. But yeah, like there is a very good chance that this 20 car grid will be, it might be 15 cars by the time we get to Sunday, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way this event goes. It's incredibly unforgiving. It's up there with the likes of Spa as it's a bit of a widowmaker for cars. It destroys cars. It's well known
It
for it.
It does. I think that Aston Martin you were talking about might have been the R Motorsport
Yeah,
62 entry
yeah,
with Luca Giotto in there as well. I don't know if he was driving at the time, but yeah, they've not had the best of luck over the years, apart from that sensational pole lap that Jake Dennis put in 2019. Formula E driver now, Jake Dennis. So talk about quality drivers that come to Bathurst. It's pretty exciting. But yeah, that's the racing side of things. Talking about the event as a whole being one of the best in terms of accessibility. I think I've never been to a motorsport event. Like, I know you hate using the term grassroots, but as a spectator, sometimes, the grassroots feeling is the best in terms of having access to wherever you want, not being, held back by security to get into the paddock, and like you can get onto the pit lane rooftop. It's pretty much open house. You buy 3 day ticket or whatever, which I hope is still like under $100. I think it was last time I went. And that's surprising considering supercars now own the 12 hour. I would have thought that they'd put the ticket prices up, but it's incredible. Like the access you get, the track to town thing that they do on the Thursday as well. They first did it in 2020, I believe, and it was a huge hit. It was good to see all the cars being driven to the track. I remember sitting at one of the roundabouts to get some photos, and I've got a good one of Fraser Ross with his thumbs out of the the driver's seat or whatever. So that was good, and then just being able to see the drivers close up and everything, see the cars close up. Never before, I reckon I'll get the chance to meet 6-time IndyCar champion Scott Dixon, for example. He was racing in 2020, so I was a bit starstruck by Scott Dixon, I've got to admit. So racing for Aston Martin with Rick Kelly and Jake Dennis that year. So it is one of those events where I think you can just you. It's like for a true motorsport fan. It's one of those ones you've got to go to, I think.
yeah. You sort of hit the nail on the head. It's one of those events where you can go, and it feels like to me what a motor racing event should be. You should be able to get up close to the cars. You should be able to meet your favorite drivers. You should be able to walk through pit lane on on a Saturday. Like, understandably, they wouldn't let you walk through pit lane during the active session, but having the ability to take photos of the garage and the cars and meet your favorite drivers and that sort of thing is one of those. It's becoming increasingly rare on a global scale. I remember going to a Formula One event in Spa in 2018, and it's almost impossible to go anywhere bar where you bought your tickets for, and I think that was more of a trait of Formula One than of the circuit or the accessibility of the track itself. But it's definitely not the way of things with Bathurst. You can go there and you can walk the track. You can go all the way from all the way from pit lane, all the way up to the top of the mountain, back down the other side. You can walk down. You can basically go wherever you want within reason. There are some closed off areas for marshal posts and just again, this is a public road, so there are houses around the circuit as well. So that you can't go everywhere, but it's um, uh, it's it's an increasingly rare thing that you can do here, and the event organisers are good enough for the Shakedown lot, and you basically, it's something that you can join in future events as well with the 12 hour. We've actually got basically a permanent spot on the inside of Conrod Strait, just leading into the chase. There's usually a barbecue and that sort of thing there as well. So, so if you see them, give them a wave, tell them I said hi, or don't. They might turn away. Um, but yeah, like it's such a rare thing to be able to do that, and it's almost a shame that you can't do it at more events. But yeah, I mean, but bit envious you met Scott Dixon, because he's a bit of a hero of mine, and a Kiwi as well. So yeah, like the fact that you can just walk up to a bloke like Scott Dixon, or like for me being able to meet Augusto Farfus at one point as well was a bit of an honor, because I'm a massive fan of Augusto and everything he does. So yeah, it's such a special thing to be able to effectively meet your heroes and these people you see on TV who are superhuman and are quite comfortable just manhandling a 1200, 1300 kilo, 600 horsepower monster around a public road that's not much wider than my driveway is quite something. It's very, very cool.
It is indeed very, very cool. And just putting it out there as well, 2023 will bring the Valentino Rossi fan club to Bathurst. If he ends up coming, we'll just be following him all weekend, won't we?
That's probably your best shot to meet the guy as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how I've always envisioned it. There's no point me have gone to Phillip Island or whatever where there'd be tons of security and you got to pay $1,000 to get a paddock pass or whatever to get in. But no, it'd be great if he ever came and was a part of it. It'd be great to just see him race around Mount Panorama. Other than that, yeah, it's just so good to see the 12 hour back on this year. Because of all the logistical stuff, I'm sure next year things will kind of be more normal to what we're used to what we've talked about today, the rich history of this event in the last decade or over a decade since it became a GT3 event. But other than that, Steve, I think, yeah, we're both really excited, you can tell, and can't wait.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And just on what you said before about the timing and that sort of thing, that's like, so if you're listening and you've been a bit sort of upset or turned off by the entry list or the size of it, more importantly, this is probably the worst time of year for this event to happen. We've had British GT start up, GT World Challenge Europe, America, and Asia are all well and truly underway. NLS qualifiers are on this weekend. We've got IMSA this weekend. We've got GT World Challenge next weekend, so those cars are being prepped for that. Next year will be, I imagine and sincerely hope, a return to normal service where we will get that 50, 60 car grid. I'm hoping we can get some of the missing teams back. I really want Triple F to come back and have another go, because they obviously had a bit of a horror time with their sole entry last time around in 2020. So, look, if you're listening and you're put off by the entry list, don't be. Watch the race. If you can still go, please go. This event needs the support to stay alive, and it's not make or break now, but I think 2023 it really needs to be a hit for it to continue, because it's such a massive effort for these teams and for these drivers to take time away from their family and from their normal lives to travel down under to entertain us, to race for us. Basically, it's entertainment at the end of the day. So please don't be put off by the entry list. These guys are incredible drivers. There's phenomenal international and local talent. So please just go, enjoy the race, watch it. Tell your friends, tell your mum, I don't know, Mother's Day gift, buy her a ticket, I don't know, but please support the event, because this needs to continue. It is honestly one of the best motorsport events on the planet.
Hit the nail on the head. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps things up for this week's show. So thank you so much again, Steve. Big shout out to the Shakedown folk as well. I'll pop all the links in the description for the episode so you can follow them, be a part of this wonderful community. And again, like just with the whole Bathurst 12-hour thing, it's an example of what makes a great motorsport community is something like Shakedown, where you can rock up to a race such as the 12 hour, and there's people there, and you can meet new people, new friends potentially, and yeah, just have a good time. So I think last time I did that at a Formula One event was a very long time ago, for example, not trying to sling mud on F1 or anything. But yeah, thank you again, Steve, for coming on and talking 12 hour with me. And yeah.
No, thanks very much for having me. It's been really good.
All right. Well, until next time, thank you guys for listening, and yeah, see you next time.